Dawn bled slowly into the Tower of London, staining its ancient stones in a hue more grey than gold. The sun, as if reluctant, clawed its way above the mist-choked horizon, but failed to bring warmth. Within the Queen's chamber, silence stretched, not the kind birthed by peace, but the kind heavy with waiting, with breath held too long, with dread blooming unseen. Anne Boleyn lay awake. She hadn't slept, not truly. Her body had stilled, her eyes had closed, but her mind ran like a hunted animal, gnawed by memory and fear. Now, as pale light seeped through the iron-barred window, she turned her head slowly, gaze resting on her lady-in-waiting, Margaret, who sat with folded hands, her face drawn and waxen. Neither spoke. Outside, not a single bell rang. No footsteps echoed. No birds sang. The usual tower rhythms, guards changing, servants murmuring, distant hammering, were absent, erased. Even the wind had fled. It was as though the world itself had halted in reverence or horror. Anne sat up, wrapping the coarse wool blanket tighter around her thin frame. Her body, once draped in velvets and pearls, now wore the chill like a second skin. "I thought they'd come at first light," Margaret whispered, voice fraying like old lace. Anne didn't answer. Her mouth was dry. She reached for the silver basin of water at her bedside, only to find it frozen at the edges. July should not be cold. The chill, she realized, was not weather. It was omen. She stood. Her bare feet touched the stone floor, and a shiver raced up her spine. She walked to the small mirror above the writing desk, a gift from Henry in another life. Her reflection stared back, pale lips, bruised eyes, a woman neither queen nor condemned, but something in between. Her face was wrong, changed. The Anne in the mirror looked at her with pity. Something was wrong. The executioner had not arrived. They had promised swiftness, mercy, a Frenchman with a sword, not an axe. That was Henry's final gesture, or perhaps his final cruelty. She turned sharply, as if she'd heard something, but there was only the stone wall. Still her skin prickled, not from cold, but from the distinct feeling of being watched. Watched by something unseen, something that remembered, something that did not forgive. The tower was awake, and it had eyes. The silence did not remain still. It shifted, slowly, like a serpent uncoiling in the dark. Anne sat by the narrow slit of a window, her fingers clasped tightly in her lap, though they trembled against her will. Her thoughts wandered to Elizabeth, her daughter, her unfinished prayer. She had not seen the child since her arrest. In the days since, she dreamed of her often, but lately those dreams had turned. In them, Elizabeth did not smile. A faint tapping interrupted the spiral of thought, sharp, hollow, deliberate. Anne looked up. It came again from within the wall, not beyond it. She stood, slowly approaching the stone. There was no crack, no opening, but the sound was real, as if tiny fingers scratched just beneath the surface, clawing from within. Then, a whisper, soft, like breath pressed against her ear. "Anne!" She gasped and turned. Margaret had fallen asleep in the chair. No one else was near. Anne pressed her back to the wall, heart pounding. Her skin felt too tight for her body. There was no air. The tower was ancient, older than kings, older than her father's ambition. She had always known it held secrets, blood-drenched memories, muttered curses, hidden bones, but she had never expected the stones to remember her name. The whisper came again, this time clearer, feminine, childlike. "Anne, you shouldn't have worn white." Anne clutched her chest. Her breath came shallow. She backed toward her cot, but her feet halted when she saw it. On the edge of the bed, just beside the pillow, lay a feather, black, slick with dew, though the room was dry. A raven's feather, but there had been no birds, no wind. She picked it up, and the moment her skin touched the shaft, the room changed. The chamber grew darker, though the window still bled light. The walls seemed to stretch. The air thickened like soup. In her ears, laughter, distant, male, familiar. She staggered back and fell onto her cot. Her head hit the stone wall with a dull thud, and for a moment her vision swam. And in that moment, she saw it. Blood. On the floor. Not fresh, but not old. The shape of a woman's body, a pale hand outstretched, ring still clinging to bone. Anne blinked, and it was gone. But the whisper remained. "Come down, my lady. It's your turn to scream." By midday, the fog outside had thickened into a woolen shroud, draping the tower in a stillness that felt both sacred and cruel. Anne stood at her narrow window again, drawn there not by choice, but by something deeper, a hunger to understand, to see. And there, on the scaffold below, they waited. Ravens. 7 of them, not flying, not cawing, just standing, perfectly still, like sentinels carved from night. They clustered around the execution block, their black eyes like pits of ink, watching nothing, or everything. Anne recoiled instinctively. Her mother's voice returned in fragments from childhood. A countryside fire, a tale half-whispered to scare little girls. If the ravens come before death, the soul will wander. They'll trap it, bind it to the place it fell. They feed on more than flesh. Annie, they feed on memory. She wanted to dismiss it, to reason, but she couldn't stop watching them. One turned its head slowly toward her window, as if it knew she looked, as if it could see her. The others followed. Anne stepped back from the light. Her breath quickened, her hands cold. She blinked and tried to laugh, but the sound caught in her throat, rough and sharp like a bone. The room seemed to shift with her heartbeat, and still the ravens waited. The child, Elizabeth, her name burned through her chest like iron. Would she remember this? Would they tell her the truth? That her mother had once been queen, crowned with trembling hands, torn down by whisper and lie? Or would they say she was a witch? Anne walked to the small wooden chest where her few belongings remained. Among them, a silken ribbon, once Elizabeth's, pale gold, frayed at the ends. She pressed it to her lips, not in hope, but in mourning. Outside, a raven took flight, not away from the scaffold, but toward her. It slammed against the window pane with a crack like thunder. Margaret jolted awake, screaming. Anne staggered back, the ribbon fluttering to the floor. The raven hovered. Its wings did not beat. It simply hung in the air, staring through the glass. A single bead of red gleamed on its beak, blood or something worse. Then it vanished. Margaret sobbed quietly. Anne did not comfort her. The ravens had come. The stories were true. They knew what the crowd did not. Anne Boleyn's soul would not be released. It would be taken, and what is taken by the tower never leaves. Afternoon darkened the chamber, unnaturally. The light dimmed, as if the sky itself mourned. Anne sat, spine rigid, her hands resting in her lap like broken birds. The door creaked. Slowly, she turned. A priest entered. Not the one she knew, not the one who had comforted her the day before with psalms and practiced empathy. This man was older, cloaked not just in black robes, but in something else, something invisible, yet thick as rot. His face was familiar, and yet not. Anne's mouth opened, but no greeting came. He didn't wait for it. He stepped forward with slow, precise steps and sat across from her. "Confess," he said, his voice dry as dead parchment. She stared. His eyes, black irises swallowed in crimson lines, seemed to drip with something ancient. "Confess what?" she managed. He smiled, or tried to. His mouth twitched, revealing teeth too even, too clean. "Not to them," he said, "to yourself." She stood, suddenly aware of how small the room had become. The walls had crept closer. The ceiling hung lower. The window no longer let light in, only shadow. "I have made peace," she said firmly, voice trembling beneath the weight of the lie. He stood, following her with the slow inevitability of tide. "No," he murmured. You have made excuses." He raised a hand, not to strike, but to reveal. His palm was split, a red gash running across it, fresh and glistening. Blood dripped to the floor in slow, echoing drops. Anne's breath caught. "You lusted for the crown," he said. "Not the man." She shook her head. "You envied the queen before you," he continued. "Catherine's pain became your ladder." Tears welled. "You birthed not love, but ambition." "Stop," she whispered. He did not. "You raised your child to be a weapon." "No," she sobbed. "You gave your soul to the throne," he hissed, "and the throne gives nothing back." Anne sank to her knees, clutching the silken ribbons still stained with her daughter's scent. The priest knelt before her, lowering his bloodied hand to her head in mock blessing. "You will die," he whispered, "but first you will remember." Suddenly he was gone. No footsteps, no door, no sound. Just the faint drip of blood from the stone above her, vanishing before it touched the floor. And in the corner of the room, the feather remained. Slick, red now, not with dew, but with her own confession. Anne collapsed onto her cot, clutching the ribbon like a relic. Her breaths were uneven, shallow, each one clawing at her throat. The room spun slowly as if the world tilted on a hinge greased with sorrow. Then, a shift, a flicker. The torch by the wall flared without touch, casting shadows that didn't belong. The cot was gone. She stood barefoot in the middle of a vast hall, crimson tapestries stretching skyward like veins. The court, but not the one she knew. This place pulsed, alive, unnatural. The scent of roses mixed with blood hung thick in the air. Marble floors rippled with a sheen that wasn't water but something stickier. Anne looked down. Her white gown was soaked to the hem in red. Not splattered, drenched, yet she felt no wound. Laughter echoed through the hall, hollow and distant. She turned. At the far end of the chamber, Henry sat upon the throne, but he was not Henry. His face was stretched tight, waxy, a mask of flesh stitched over bone, the eyes hollowed black. He wore a crown made of jagged gold, and at his feet courtiers danced barefoot in pools of blood, their smiles frozen wide like broken marionettes. They chanted her name. "Anne, Anne, Queen of the Damned." The crown appeared in her hands, heavy, cold, made not of gold, but of woven thorns, glistening with dark sap. It dug into her palms. A voice whispered behind her ear, "Wear it." Anne turned, but nothing was there. She lifted the crown. Her hands bled as the thorns sank deeper. Still, she placed it upon her head. The hall screamed. Roses burst from the walls, black roses, each petal edged with razors. The dancers fell, skin peeling, laughter melting into wails. Henry stood towering now, his face cracking, revealing fire beneath. He pointed at her. "You wanted this," he thundered. "You took it." Anne's feet bled as she walked forward. The marble scorched with every step. Behind her, a trail of footprints red on red. At the center of the chamber, a mirror appeared. Tall as a door, she looked into it and screamed. Her reflection held her severed head in its hands. The mouth moved, whispering words that made no sound. The eyes blinked. Anne reached toward the glass. The world shattered. She woke, gasping. The cot beneath her soaked in sweat. The room was silent again. The torch dimmed, but on the floor beside her rose petals, black, fresh, and beneath them the blood had returned. Evening came too fast, as if time itself wished to rush her to the blade. The air in Anne's chamber felt tighter now, pressing against her ribs like invisible hands. The walls had shrunk again. The sky outside the window, once grey, was now bruised violet, darkening by the minute. The door creaked. Anne did not rise. She didn't need to. She already knew who had entered. Boots stepped in, soundless on the stone floor. Yet each movement reverberated through her bones. She turned her head. The French executioner stood just inside the doorway. A tall, lean man cloaked in black, face bare, no hood, no mask. Just a clean-shaven jaw and eyes so calm they were terrifying. He bowed, slowly, reverently. "My lady," he said. His accent was smooth, almost kind. Anne stared at him, heart thudding low and deep like distant war drums. His face, there was something wrong with it. Not in form, but in recognition. She had never met him, yet she knew him. Not from life, from dreams. He had been there in the blood-stained court, in the mirror that wept, in the chamber where rose petals bled. Always in the corner, always watching, she stood. He said nothing more. No lecture, no cruelty. That, she realized, was the horror, the civility, the professional coldness. He moved with the grace of ritual, a man not performing death, but delivering it like a holy sacrament. "Will it hurt?" she asked. The words left her lips before she could stop them. He hesitated, then simply, "No, not if you stay still." Anne's breath caught, not from comfort, but despair. He didn't offer mercy, only efficiency. He turned, moving toward the door, expecting her to follow. But she didn't. She stared at his back, his silent shadow, and felt her knees tremble. Her hands found the ribbon again. She held it like a relic, a shield. "I've seen you before," she whispered. He paused. "In my dreams, in my nightmares, you were always there." Still, he said nothing. But she saw it. His shoulders tensed, just slightly, a flicker of truth. She stepped forward, eyes narrowing. "What are you?" she asked. He turned back, slowly. "I am the last man every queen sees," he said. "And some never stop seeing me." The door opened behind him. Light from torches flickered down the hall. He stepped aside. Anne Boleyn stood at the threshold of death and bowed her head. The executioner waited, and the tower exhaled. The hallway leading to the scaffold was long, too long. Anne walked barefoot. The stone was damp beneath her feet, stained with centuries of secrets. Each step echoed, not like sound, but like memory. A rhythm of betrayals and regrets. Her gown, simple and dark, clung to her frame. She did not look back. The executioner walked behind her in silence. 2 guards flanked her, though their eyes did not meet hers. One clutched a rosary so tightly his fingers bled. The other trembled, as if fearing contagion not of crime, but of fate. The tower walls whispered, not with voices, but with breath. Cold, pulsing wind that leaked from every crack. It carried scents of iron, wet moss, burnt candle wax. Anne lifted her chin. The air here was older than kings. It remembered. She passed the chapel, where she had once knelt beside Henry, his fingers interlocked with hers, false promises bleeding between their palms. A vision struck her. Catherine of Aragon, kneeling in the same chapel, eyes swollen, praying to a god who turned his face away. A shadow passed. Anne blinked. The shadow wore a veil. She turned her head and saw nothing. Outside, the sky had darkened further, though no night had come. The scaffold loomed ahead, wooden steps glistening with dew, or sweat, or blood. Ravens lined its railing again. More this time. 13. She paused. The crowd was gathered, hushed and wide-eyed. They leaned forward, drawn not by cruelty, but by hunger for drama, for spectacle, for absolution through another's fall. Among them, she saw familiar faces. Thomas Cromwell, lips pursed like a prayer gone stale. Jane Seymour, pale and still, her hands folded too neatly. And in the very back, half-shadowed beneath a hood, Henry. His eyes locked with hers. No sorrow, no rage, just finality. The casual gaze of a man who had once picked her from a garden and now tossed her like a bruised bloom. Anne looked away. She reached the first step. A child's voice, clear and small, echoed from the tower behind her. "Mama!" Anne froze. Her breath faltered. "Mama, don't go!" She turned her head violently, but the corridor behind her was empty. Only mist remained. Tears welled in her eyes, but she did not cry. Queens do not cry before the end. She ascended the scaffold slowly, each step a funeral bell. The executioner followed, and behind her, unseen in the mist, footsteps echoed that belonged to no living soul. The scaffold groaned beneath her feet, wood warped by countless endings. Anne stood in the center, wind lifting the hem of her gown like a timid hand. The air here was wrong, thicker, heavier. She could feel it pressing down as if the tower itself crouched upon her shoulders. The executioner stood at her side, silent, impassive. The sword was not visible. That alone unnerved her. She had expected to see it gleaming, to face the instrument of her death, to lock eyes with it as one does with a mirror. But he had hidden it behind him, beneath cloth, like a magician's final trick. Anne looked out at the crowd, rows upon rows, nobles, servants, commoners, hungry eyes, eager mouths. None met hers now, except one. Henry, still veiled by his hood, still a portrait of ice. But now his mouth moved, just slightly. She saw it. A smile. She knelt. The scaffold was cold, even through the wool beneath her knees. Her breath curled in front of her lips like smoke. Her hands trembled as she gathered her skirts, tucking them beneath her. She did not want them flaring, not at the end. Modesty, even now. Even here. She whispered a final prayer, not to be saved but to be remembered. The executioner moved, but he did not strike. Instead, he turned his back and began to walk away, slowly, deliberately, to the edge of the scaffold. The crowd stirred. Confused murmurs rippled like distant thunder. Then he turned back, his eyes locking onto hers, and approached again. Anne's heart raced. He circled her now, once, twice. The second time, he paused behind her. She flinched. Still, nothing. She looked up past the edge of the scaffold, to the tower walls. Were those faces in the stone, watching? She blinked. No. Yes. A woman, pale, veiled, lips moving. Catherine. The third circle began. Anne began to sob, not from fear, not from pain, but from shame. This was not justice. This was theater. She was not dying. She was performing her death. She remembered the court, the gowns, the music. She had once believed herself powerful. Now she was spectacle. The executioner whispered something in French. She did not understand, then silence. He reached behind his back, and she knew the blade had waited, not for readiness, but for humiliation. When it came, it was not with roar, but with whisper. A hiss through air, a snap of silence. Darkness bloomed, not sudden but slow, curling like black silk over her vision, and Anne Boleyn fell into death. Knowing the sword had waited until she had broken, there was no light, only sound, then the absence of it. A single gasp from the crowd, a cry from someone too young to understand, the thud of something soft yet final hitting wood. Then, nothing. And yet, Anne remained, suspended. She felt no pain, only a weightlessness that frightened her more than the blade. She floated above the scaffold, above the shocked expressions, above the pooling blood that now stained the platform like spilled ink. She looked down and saw herself, kneeling, still, unmoving. Her head had rolled only inches away, eyes open, staring. The executioner stepped back, blood glinting on the hidden sword now resting at his side. He bowed again, a flourish, a performer concluding his scene. But Anne did not rise. Her soul did not drift upward. The ravens shrieked. One landed beside her severed head, tilting its own, as if inspecting its twin. It opened its beak, not to caw, but to whisper. She heard it. Stay! The word echoed within her, not in ears, but in bone. She turned, or thought she did. There was no body to move, but her vision shifted. The sky above the tower grew darker. Clouds thickened like wool soaked in ink. The air shook with a silent pulse. From the scaffold, the crowd began to disperse, but their shapes twisted. Some no longer cast shadows. Others had none to begin with. Anne tried to scream, but there was no mouth. Only thought, only terror. And in that moment, she realized the truth of the legend. The ravens had come, and they had claimed her. A presence bloomed behind her, cold, massive, old. Not man, not beast. A will, a hunger. The tower. It lived, and it did not let go. She felt her essence sinking, pulled into the stones, the wood, the very marrow of the scaffold. Her memories blurred, her name unraveled. Was she Anne? Was she queen? Or was she simply next? She reached blindly for anything, her daughter's ribbon, her father's face, her childhood laughter, but all dissolved like smoke through clenched fists. All except one word, Elizabeth. It glowed faintly in the dark, the only ember of self left unconsumed. Anne clung to it, and with it her soul stopped sinking. She did not ascend, but neither did she vanish. She lingered, trapped, bound to the place where history had fed on her flesh. The tower did not forget, and now neither would she. The tower stands still. Its stones, blackened by centuries of smoke and sorrow, rise against the London sky like a mausoleum for forgotten queens. Tourists shuffle along its corridors now, snapping photos, listening to guides, sipping coffee from disposable cups. But the stones remember. They always remember. On a damp, overcast morning, a group gathers by the scaffold site. A guide, young and earnest, clears her throat and begins. This was where Anne Boleyn was executed in 1536. She was the first of Henry VIII's wives to be beheaded. The words come easily, rehearsed. She speaks of the French sword, the quick death, the dignity of a queen who died with grace. But her voice falters mid-sentence. She glances behind her. No one there. Yet she felt it, breath on her neck. Not wind, not air. Something colder. The group waits, puzzled. She forces a smile. It's said her ghost still walks here, but don't worry, Anne's harmless. They chuckle, and then from the back, a child speaks. Mama? The voice is small, echoing. The guide turns. A little girl stands alone, apart from the group, pointing at the scaffold. Her eyes are wide, not in fear, but recognition. Mama, she says again. The guide approaches, heart thudding. There's no one there, sweetheart. The girl doesn't blink. She's crying. The guide turns her gaze and the scaffold flickers. Just for a moment. Not visibly, not solid, but in the corner of her mind, something sharp. A woman kneeling, a crown of thorns, a ribbon on the wood, gold and frayed, and eyes, open, watching. The guide shivers. She cannot explain why her throat tightens, or why, that night she dreams of roses blooming black through cobblestone cracks. She never tells anyone, but others do. A guard swears he hears footsteps pacing the Queen's chamber at 2:36 every morning. A historian records static on a voice recorder, then plays it back to hear a whisper, "Stay." A visitor faints at the scaffold, claiming she saw her own reflection blink from the wood. Anne Boleyn did not rise that day. Her body fell. But her soul, the one stolen by delay, by spectacle, by betrayal, remains. She waits not for Henry, not for justice, but for Elizabeth, the only thread that held her humanity. She calls her name still, across centuries, across silence, through stone and sorrow. And when the ravens cry at dusk, those who know the old stories say a queen answers. Not with words, but with weeping. The tower holds her, and the queen never left.